really honored today to be joined by my good friend and our new Attorney General, William Tong, who I'll introduce in a moment. And of course, I want to recognize my partner, our State Senator, Christine Cohen, and our First Selectman, Hoey. And then there's some other folks around here that we wanted to invite this morning to talk about this issue. And then, of course, we want to hear from you. But we just want to make a few sort of opening remarks at the top of this conversation to frame the discussion that we'll have for the next little while, which is that everyone in this room knows, obviously, that the cost of prescription drugs are going up and up and up. And the amount of relief that you are getting is going down and down and down, especially when it comes to insurance these days. And so we collectively, whether it's in the legislature or at the Attorney General level, have been trying to work on finding solutions to the rising cost of prescription drugs. And this is something that I stumbled upon almost by accident. As some of you probably know, I spent the first couple years of my office term working on the opioid issue. And in doing so, I actually ended up learning a lot about the pharmaceutical industry because the genesis of the opioid crisis that we're in right now is the pharmaceutical industry. And so the more I learned about that from the opioid side, the more I learned that the actual prescription drug side was just as complicated and problematic as the opioid piece of this. And in 2018, I worked very closely with our state comptroller to pass Connecticut's very first price transparency law, which basically did a lot of different things, but primarily the most important piece of it was that for the very first time in Connecticut, any drug maker that raises the price of their drug by 20% in 1 year or 50% over 3 years will for the very first time have to justify in writing that price increase. That is information that has never been disclosed before. They've never been sort of put on the hot seat and told the public why that is. And that law actually takes effect next year. The other big part of that drug bill is that it, for the very first time, will require the insurers to actually put forward some information that they've never disclosed before, like the top 25 most commonly prescribed drugs on their plans, the top 25 drugs that increased year to year, and the top 25 drugs that they felt were the most utilized on their plans. All that data, to most people, would be a lot of numbers. To us policy wonk nerds, that is like Christmas morning because we will finally sort of understand the trends that are driving this and require the insurers to do that. And the last piece about this bill, and then I'm going to turn it over to William, is that it also required, we were the first state in the nation to require transparency for what are called PBMs. They're pharmacy benefit managers. These are sort of the middlemen between drug companies and insurance companies. And they have a very powerful role in all this because they determine what drugs go on something called a formulary. And the formulary, as many of you probably know, is a list of drugs that are covered by your insurance. And so for the very first time, for the first state in the nation, we are requiring these PBMs to disclose how much money they are getting from the drug companies in the form of what's known as a rebate to determine what drugs go on there. There's basically a lot, in my opinion, of shady things happening to determine what drugs are on the formulary and what drugs are not. And for the first time, we will know how much a drug company is paying them to do that. But more importantly, what we're also going to know from that is that if they say, the drug companies say that these rebates get passed on to us as consumers, although we see less and less of those rebates. And we never know why that is. But now we will, because for the very first time, this law requires those PBMs to disclose how much they're taking in from drug companies and how much they're giving back to us. They fought this tooth and nail, but I'm proud to say that that was a bipartisan bill. And that bill, like I said, takes effect this year. 2020 is the first year that all that data will be being collected, and in 2021 it'll become public for the first time. So this is something that I'm really passionate about. We'll get into some of the other stuff that we've been working on lately, but I want to turn it over to William, and I'll just say this about him. William was a colleague of mine in the State House before he was elected Attorney General. He is somebody who was recently on 60 Minutes talking about this very issue, but I can tell you he's a person of very humble origins. I just saw him the other day. His parents owned a Chinese restaurant in Hartford, and he was tending to a wok with Congressman Jim Hines, talking about how he had grown up. And he's somebody who I think is making us really proud in a very quick period of time as our new Attorney General and somebody who came a long way and will always remember his humble roots. And he's working every day to protect people right now in the state, regardless of what their needs are, and especially when it comes to drug pricing. And I'll let him take over from here, but I just want to have you join me in welcoming him.
So I promised Sean that for his annual pancake breakfast, I will make a guest appearance with my wasp. St. Patrick's Day. We'll work it in somehow.
Yeah, we'll work it.
It's great to be with all of you this morning and with all of our friends at the table and AARP. And let me just thank Representative Scanlon and Senator Cohen for having us here this morning for this really important discussion. I served with Sean for 6, 8, 10 years. 4. 20? Feels like 20. Let me say that there's no stronger leader in the General Assembly on these specific issues. You know, when we go to other towns, we say, you have a really great state rep, and, we just offer those general, sometimes platitudes about people. But Sean is the leader in this state on opioids and on drug prices. And there's nobody else in the building who you can identify who is the #1 voice on these issues. And he's one of my very close friends in life and in politics, but also one of my strongest partners. And so you're all very lucky to have Sean Scanlon. So let me just start out with how we got here and why this is important. So every morning I get up and I take a pill for a skin condition that many of us have, rosacea, right? It's just a general inflammation. And the typical prescription for rosacea for a lot of us is doxycycline, which is a very common antibiotic that's been around for 50 years. And so doxycycline is sold in its generic form, and there should be no reason why doxycycline, the price of doxycycline, which has been around for 50 years, should go up, right? Particularly in its generic form. If it's in its generic form, that means that one formulation by one drug manufacturer is no different than another drug manufacturer. And really they should compete on price, and that should keep the price low, on top of the fact that there's nothing special about doxycycline. Except that the doxycycline that I take, that formulation, has gone up by 8,000% over the past several years. And there's just no explanation for it. And so lawyers in the Attorney General's office read an article about a heart medication called digoxin. And digoxin was featured in the New York Times. And digoxin was the subject of a huge spike in prices over a several-year period. So we started digging. And what we've discovered is that the generic drug industry, which is largely dominated by about 20 companies, is the largest private sector corporate cartel in history. And I don't say that lightly. When I say cartel, I mean people, guys, men and women, sitting around a table, literally and figuratively, deciding what prices they're going to charge and how they're going to divide up the market amongst them, which I don't have to tell you is highly illegal, right? Under our nation's antitrust laws, going way back to trust busting and the railroads and all of that is highly illegal to fix prices and to allocate market share. And I think that answers one of the critical questions all of us have about healthcare and about drug prices generally, which is why are prices so high and why have they gone up so quickly? And the reason why in the generic drug industry, in large part, is because the market is fixed and it's rigged. And it's disheartening to see that, and it's in many ways incredible and unbelievable that that's where we are. But Congress created the generic drug market in 1984, and the very purpose of that market was to promote competition, right? once drugs come off patent protection and patent protection expires, the only difference between the drugs is the company selling them. And really the only difference is price and in some ways sort of sales and distribution channels. And so what should happen is once patent protection expires, prices should go down, and they should be fighting on price, and it should drive it down to its lowest possible commercially viable price. The market doesn't function that way. In fact, it functions quite the opposite way, and prices have gone up and up and up over the years. This accounts for $100 billion a year in this country on an annual basis alone, and it's 90% of all prescriptions. So if you think about that and the tremendous toll that it takes on all of us and our families, that this industry, in my estimation, has literally stolen billions of dollars from Connecticut and from people across this country by engaging in highly, highly illegal price fixing and market allocation. How do I know this? Because they're doing it openly, brazenly, utterly without shame. We have text messages, we have emails, we have phone records. We have phone records that show on days when they increase prices, you don't always have, and often you don't have the content of the phone call, but you have when did the phone call start and when did it end and who are they talking to. So I'm told often to my face by generic drug manufacturers, we're not fixing prices, you're full of it. Okay, you've got nothing on us. Okay, so then tell me why on a day when you raise prices, your lead sales representatives and marketing executives are talking to their counterparts in other companies hundreds of times on that day. And then the prices miraculously go up. And so we have phone records that show, 5 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 seconds, 45 minutes, back and forth among the major manufacturers. And then the prices go up. And they stay up. And then, to go a step further, then you get emails after the fact memorializing these conversations. And so one manufacturer will say in an email to their senior executives, yeah, I talked to the guys over at Teva or Sandoz, and they're good. They're on board. We're going to raise prices. And then on top of that, they'll go a step further, and they'll say, okay, there's a big bid coming from CVS or Walgreens. You guys take CVS, we'll take Walgreens. Let's not fight about it. Everybody keeps their prices down. And all of that, as you all know, common sense, is highly illegal. So let me just close this part of it by telling you another quick story. I didn't, before I took office, I knew about the case. I didn't really understand the depth and the scale of this fraud on the American people. And so I asked the senior-most lawyers in the office to gather for a meeting, and the two lawyers leading the case, we now have sued the 20 largest manufacturers in this space, including the largest in the world, Teva Pharmaceuticals. And so I asked them to give a PowerPoint presentation and to show us some of the evidence. And so we're sitting there, and one of the lawyers in my office, Eric Lohr, he does all the defensive work in my office, so he supervises all the work we do representing the state of Connecticut. So he doesn't do the offensive work. He doesn't do this work. So he doesn't see this stuff every day. So he's sitting there, and we're watching this presentation by the lead lawyers, and there's a big screen and a PowerPoint going, and they're showing us the text messages and the emails and the phone records showing overt, outright collusion between major drug manufacturers. And Eric's sitting there, and he starts to fidget. And he's a big guy. He's a former submariner in the Navy, and he starts to fidget. And we go from text message to email, phone record, back to text message, and he starts getting more and more agitated. And finally, I turn to Eric, I'm like, Eric, you okay? What's up? And he points to the screen, and he goes, that's illegal! I said, yes, that's the point. So, again, it's disheartening to see people engage in that kind of misconduct, that they come in every day, to work, and they're not unlike us, right? These are people that have families and they drive their Subaru out back in the parking lot at a generic drug manufacturer, usually somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, right? Somewhere in New Jersey or Pennsylvania. And the way I see it is they go in, they turn on their computer, they have a cup of coffee, and they break the law. And then they go to lunch, right? Pick up their kids, you know. They break the law again, you know, and then they go home. And then they get up in the morning and they do it again. And it's that kind of regularity that's deeply ingrained in this industry and this system. That's really shocking, but it also shows us how much work we have to do to go after the system and dismantle the system that's rigged against us. And that's what we're doing every day on behalf of 49 states. It is, other than opioids, the largest multi-state coalition, and I'm very proud to say that Connecticut is leading it.
I just wanted to say, I'm so grateful. As a freshman legislator, I come at this issue from a personal standpoint, much like you did with recycling. Just so grateful to Attorney General Tom for wanting to tackle one of our biggest issues nationwide. Whereas other people might feel like, oh, this is too big, you know, and you came at it strong and it's making a dent for all of us. I am so grateful to Representative Scanlon as well for leading the charge in the legislature. So I'm a migraine sufferer, and just like your story of rosacea, I have very similar stories of treating my medicine as gold when I go and get a sample from the doctor's office, because I know that I can't afford it otherwise. So I suffered through many migraines without treatment because I save those precious pills for the times that I absolutely need them. And so we absolutely need to come at this. I was just talking to a gentleman in the back of the room about a news story he saw about a young girl needing life-saving medicine and hearing that it would cost millions of dollars for this one dose of life-saving medicine. So there's a fundamental issue here, and we need to take care of the people of the state of Connecticut and of our country. It's a human problem, and we need to be taking care of human beings. So grateful that you're on this and that we're all here today and we can work together to tackle this problem.
And I will note that our other colleague from the Guilford delegation, Representative Candelora, was going to be here this morning. He unfortunately had a family situation that arose and he's not able to join us, but I do want to stress this is a very bipartisan issue. This is something that 49 state attorney generals are working on. This is my bill, the transparency bill that passed in 2018, passed with every single Democrat and every single Republican voting for that bill. So we fight a lot about things in politics today. You all know that. This is not one of them. We are all committed to solving this problem. And before we open it up, I want to just turn to some people who are around the table today to share their stories and their part of this. And I want to start with Kristen Whitney Daniels, who is from Connecticut Insulin for All. A couple weeks ago, I read an article that some of you may have seen in the Washington Post that blew my mind. And it was about a group of American citizens who were getting together and getting in a car and driving to Canada because they couldn't afford to buy insulin, literally a life-saving drug, in their own country. Kristen and I have been talking together for a while about some of the things that we can do together on this front, and I would love to have you open this up and talk about what you're working on and why this is so important to you.
Thank you, Representative Scanlon. I'm Kristen Whitney Daniels. I'm the chapter leader for the Connecticut Insulin for All chapter, which is part of T1 International. The chapters came out of the insulin crisis really in the last 2 years. We have noticed an uptick in people dying from type 1 diabetes because they do not have affordable and equal access to insulin, a drug that has been around since 1922 and was sold for $1 for its patent. Today, the drug sells for about $295 out of pocket. That's a 1,200% increase in inflation since 1996. Insulin has really become the poster child for pharmaceutical issues lately. It marks a lot of different pharmaceutical drugs in that a lot of the issues that Attorney General Tom was talking about kind of this cartel going on. There's 3 major insulin companies that own 90% of insulin markets. And they have pretty much been moving in lockstep throughout the years. We know that when one raises it, the other raises it. And type 1 diabetics across the country have been feeling it. We know that about 25% of diabetics ration their insulin. So that means a very dangerous practice where people cut back on how much insulin they're receiving in order to afford it, in order to stretch it further. That could mean exercising, eating less food, foregoing rent, foregoing basic necessities that we need today. And I am actually one of those in that 25% that's had to ration their insulin. Because it costs more than my monthly income to get my full month's supply on insurance. And this is with insurance and a high deductible plan. So we care very deeply about this issue. We know that we're being overcharged, and I look forward to working together to try to save this issue and to care for a lot of other drugs. We know that autoimmune issues they come in clusters. So I also, not only do I take insulin, which is the 6th most expensive liquid on this planet, behind, horseshoe crab blood and scorpion venom. So it's interesting how this drug that's been around for 100 years is up in that category. But I also take Humira, another one of the most expensive drugs on the planet. So
The most expensive.
Yes. So I feel this pain very deeply, and I know that our constituents do as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for being here. The first time I can ever recall understanding the insurance system of our country, I was standing at CVS in Guilford with my mom, and I remember a woman was hysterically crying in front of us, talking to the pharmacist, and she was saying she couldn't afford it. And the thing she kept saying, I was probably 12 or 13, was, my doctor told me I have to take this. What do you mean I can't afford it? So the next person I'd like to turn to is Ken Ferrucci. He's from the Connecticut State Medical Society. They represent thousands of doctors across the state. Doctors are obviously on the front lines of this every day because they are trying to prescribe medicines that they know work, that they know will help their patients, and yet they are powerless sometimes when it comes to their patients' ability to afford those drugs that they're prescribing that they know their work. So, Ken, if you could share some light with us, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator, Representative, and Attorney General Tom for having me here today. And I think already in the comments here, a lot of issues have been barely touched that show that this is a very, very complex issue that goes well beyond simply how much we're charging for drugs. You heard the words high deductible over here. You've heard about what you could call orphan drugs, which are for diseases that very few people have. And then you've also heard about doxycycline, which is a drug that's prescribed thousands of times a day, even. And physicians are in a unique position because not only are they providing care to their patients, many of them are also purchasers of health care and they're consumers of health care. So they get it from all different directions. And powerless, I think, is a good word that you said. And I think there's a lot of confusion a lot of times about whether or not physicians are powerless. Patients don't necessarily always think that their physicians are going to be powerless within the system. This is one of those places that it is. And we talk about drawing back the curtain. Because if you've seen some of the flow charts that talk about the insurers, the manufacturers, and the PBMs, you can't follow the arrows many times. And that's what Representative Scanlon and Attorney General Tong and others have really been trying to do. Put the arrows in order so that we know who's making what decisions. There are a lot of things going on that are impacting patients. You're talking about coupons that PBMs are kicking back to manufacturers and to the insurers for prescribing their drugs. But the severe impact that is very frustrating physicians is the fact that Sean talks about somebody crying hysterically because she can't afford her medication. You heard about insulin over here. Is it causes a lack of adherence, and that's critical to healthcare because The longer you go without adhering to the drug regimen that you've been prescribed, the more you're then going to have other impacts on your physical health, and it's going to lead to more cost to you into the healthcare system. So there's a true benefit for us controlling drug costs, so people can afford those frontline medications that they need. And another issue that Sean brought up was, I'm sorry.
You don't call me Sean, it's fine.
brought up was the whole opioid crisis and what that's doing. I mean, a lot of the reasons that we're seeing the use of illicit drugs is because many people can't get the medications they need to manage the pains and their illnesses appropriately, and are turning to illicit medications to try to take care of that, and it's leading them down the road to addiction. And so it's all intertwined, and that's why we're happy to be part of this discussion so that physicians can take care of their patients the way that their patients need to be taken care of.
Thanks, everybody. So lastly, in this little segment, I wanted to turn to two great organizations that advocate for seniors that I obviously very closely their session to try to pass this bill you've heard that would allow everybody, regardless of their age. And John Rowenhauser, Barbara Plummer-Fry, ARP, our group that I worked with very closely this session to try to pass a bill that would have allowed for the importation of drugs from Canada. Obviously, we know how people are driving there because they can't afford their drugs here. I had sponsored and helped write a bill along with ARP to allow for the importation of Canadian drugs. My bill passed the House, but it didn't go up for a vote in the Senate before we adjourned. And it's something that we're working on. But ARP has been doing a lot of work on this, and I'm wondering if you could share, John, what you've been doing in the bill and how people have been involved in your fight.
Absolutely, Representative Scanlon. Representatives.
Yeah.
Chairman Scanlon.
First of all, thank you for all the work you've done over the years, even prior to being chairman of the committee on prescription drug pricing. It's been great work. There's some improvements, and you're now doing work on this. Some of the people like this will help inform what we're doing. We certainly, Attorney General Tom has been in the legislature now taking on the generic manufacturers, which is really a great thing. One of the things that we really haven't touched on is regular prescription drug manufacturers. And we have a lot of information about how this is impacting the 50 plus, age 50 plus population. And you know a lot to say, and across the country. Average old person takes about 4.5 prescriptions, typically for a chronic condition, every day. And you hear a lot, about the prescription drug manufacturers talking about how much money it costs them to bring a drug to market and research development. Let me tell you a few statistics. In Connecticut, between 2012 and 2017, in a 5-year period, the average cost of prescription drugs, name brand, have gone up almost 60%. Almost 60%. And think about that when you're looking at 4.5 prescriptions a day. And the same equivalent of average residents' income is only going up about 12%. Something's out of whack. And you hear some farmers talking about the amount of money they put into taking a drug to market, particularly in research and development. About 80% of every dollar goes to something other than R&D. 80%. So that's a paper tiger. I can say it, but that's a paper tiger. In fact, in 2018, $169 million went just to lobby. Lobbying in Washington, lobbying in Hartford. I can tell you, Representative Scanlon, I'm sure you can attest to the pressures that you and others were under from big pharma and pharmaceutical manufacturers and some of the good work you've done over the years. So you know that's true. And here's the real killer. $6 billion advertising drugs. We pay double what other countries, they want you to go in and ask your doctor to prescribe you. $6 billion. So something's out of whack here. And we pay double what other countries are paying for the same drugs. And that's why people are voting companies. And what we know, so the Canada solution can't fantasy. What we do know is that we think it will put pressures on drug manufacturing companies to bring prices down. So there are lots we can do. We have a campaign called Stop RX Free that is trying to bring attention to an issue, as you pointed out, is a 90+% agreement among the population issue. 90 plus. If we can't get something done on Washington and Mark on an issue that has 90 plus favorability, then we really gotta rethink what we're doing here. Barbara, I just turn briefly her. She's one of our volunteers on the front lines, and she reaches people every day on this campaign. So Barbara, I don't know if you want to.
Well, you know, with the insulin issue, I have a family member today. And she has some other health issues as well. And last year, she was saying, oh, well, I should take X number of units today, but I'm going to do less because I have to make it last until I can refill my prescription because I don't have the money. Okay, there, Social Security check comes in. So her daughter is also a diabetic, and luckily they are, their prescription schedule is a little bit different. So they're constantly trading back and forth insulin here just to be able to help each other out, just to get through the month. And it's just very difficult, you know, to hear that that's what my family members have to do. She also has to use catheters. And again, she doesn't have enough money at the end of the month. And she has to use catheters a few extra times during this month. She's washing them out immediately. And I tell you how many times she was in that she only had, you know, I think she was admitted 3 times for issues that probably would not have happened had she had the means to have enough insulin. She ended up with a kidney infection, her kidney shut down. I mean, these are real things that now it's affecting people on a daily basis. It's really not fair for a 70-year-old woman who worked most of her life.
Last but not least, I want to turn to Betty Marino, who is the head of the Alliance for Retired Americans, who's also been a great partner in us in this effort.
First of all, thank you very much.
And last but not least, I just want to turn to Betty Marino, who is the head of the Alliance for Retired Americans, who's also been a great partner in us in this effort.
First of all, thank you very much. Our Scanlon with our Healthcare Heroes Award in September. His partner in the fight, Senator Lester, was going to give him an award in September. And thank you, Attorney General, for all of your good work. We represent in Connecticut about 55,000 retirees, and we're affiliated with nationally with AFL-CIO. And this has become healthcare, and the costs have become our #1 issue. In fact, this coming Tuesday, the 20th, is a National Day of Action on prescription drugs and the cost of healthcare. And I don't know if you've heard this yet. I just found out last night that somewhere in Hartford, in a place to be determined today, Senator Blumenthal is going to be talking about reducing the cost of prescription drugs. So it's a National Day of Action on that. Last year, we received a small grant from the Universal Healthcare Foundation of Connecticut. And the purpose of the grant was to go out and collect healthcare stories. And most of the people we talked to were senior citizens. And we collected about 85 stories and put them into a book, and we made a very short video about them. What we heard over and over was this phrase, "I'm scared to death." I'm scared to death that with the rising costs, especially of prescription drugs, and as John said, they take about an average four pills a day, I'm afraid that I won't be able to afford them. And we heard stories of people rationing their prescription drugs. And in fact, just yesterday, I was talking to a retiree, and she said she has some intestinal problems. And last week, she went to her doctor, and he gave her 2 prescriptions. When she went to fill them, they were each $600 a month. And she said, "I can't afford that." And I said to her, "What are you going to do?" And she is a retired nurse. She has some insight into that. She said, well, I'm trying over the counter because that's what I can afford. I don't know if it's going to help me or not. And nobody should be in that kind of a position to have to, decide what can I afford and is it going to help me? So the stories, many of them are heartbreaking, of people who are really risking their health because they can't afford it.
So now I want to open it up. Questions, stories, comments, anybody want to start? Yeah?
I just have a question for the Attorney General. I just wondered how long that case that you want to take will take. Do you have any idea how long that case will go through the courts?
So, I think it's going to be years.
Years, yeah.
We're deep in the discovery phase right now, and I wish I could say that, we're getting close to the end of that process. I can't, because every day we find something new, and we learn a lot more about how this industry works. And again, the depth and the scale is staggering, so it's just going to take time to unpack it all. I do hear from the manufacturers all the time that are trying to convince me that they did nothing wrong, and there's always the possibility that they want to engage in some kind of settlement discussions, and that's always a possibility. But the amount they took from Connecticut, the American people, it's a pretty big number if they're going to settle this case.
As a follow-up to that, you identified the problem, you know what it is. So what do you see? If they said to you, what's the deal you want? What would be your solution? What do you see as the solution to this issue?
Well, I think it's
And to frame it a little bit more, that's only, as this gentleman was saying, that's only one piece of the whole problem, healthcare-wise, right? I mean, we've got, it's not just the problem with pharma, there's other people with pricing issues all the way through the system.
Oh, sure.
So, and I guess one other follow-up to that is, it's Connecticut, but what on the federal level is being done? I mean, you've identified this as something that's criminal almost, the way they price drugs, and you go to jail for that stuff. Where's the feds on this? Where's the FBI? What's going on?
So you'll have to ask the feds.
Well, you asked, right?
This administration, where they are in this. The states are in the lead in this case. It is frankly a bit unusual that the states are so far ahead of the feds on this issue. It's often the feds are neck and neck with you, or they're ahead, and because they have tremendous resources. But the states are in the lead in this case and have been. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Here's the immediate, from our perspective, what has to happen. What has to happen is we need to go to trial, or there needs to be some other kind of resolution where we claw back billions upon billions of dollars that these companies have stolen from all of us, okay? And that those damages be paid to all of us as consumers across this country, to the 56 states and territories that have attorneys general. That's number one. Number two is, as part of a trial, damages, if there is a settlement, there has to be what we would call as lawyers injunctive relief, right? Where they agree and we order them to take whatever steps are necessary so this never happens again. Okay, and I hope on a parallel track that the Department of Justice continues its investigation and that people are held accountable, and if they broke the law and there's criminal sanction, they should go to jail. Okay, but that's what we can do. I think it has to go yet a step further, and it needs to be state legislative change that comes out of what we do, but also the feds. And Congress, I don't have to tell everybody in this room, is having a tough time doing, a lot of anything, right? And trying to be diplomatic. And we need Congress to get out of its own way and to pass meaningful reform to a market they created, right, in 1984. And so without Congress finally shutting this down, and that probably includes more transparency, ratcheting up the penalties for this kind of misconduct, a whole host of remedies. Without Congress, what we do is only part of the solution.
I would just add on my side, on the legislative side, like I said, 2018 was all about transparency. We couldn't do anything policy-wise without seeing what's going on first. It's like you can't figure out what's going on with the car unless you open the hood and figure out what's up. So that law, like I said, will finally get the first data in 2020. All of that year data will come back in 2021. Any politician that tells you that they've passed one bill and they've solved the crisis is a joke. This is a cumulative effort of many years of work that we have to do to right many years of wrong on the part of the industry. But to your point, and to Ken's point, it's a global problem. It's not just the drug companies, it's everybody involved in it. And in the bill that I worked with AARP on this year that John mentioned that had the Canadian stuff, there was another really important piece of that that didn't get a lot of attention, but it would have been a big deal, and that was to set the very first benchmark for all global healthcare spending in the state, that drug companies, pharmaceutical companies, PBMs, insurance companies, hospitals, they all had to try to be under this benchmark of total spending. And if they didn't get under that benchmark, they had to come back to us in a public hearing, in a public setting, before the cameras, before everybody, and explain why they did not meet that benchmark of saving on cost and what they were going to do the next year to try to mitigate that cost. I think, again, like transparency, once we get the global picture of what's driving this, and you realize that it's everyone, it's not just one piece of it, we can finally begin to try to understand how we can tackle it. And I am committed to doing that for as long as I have this gig, because healthcare is what I really enjoy working on. I think it's the most important issue to a lot of people's lives, and I really want to try to make a difference to lower the cost of it while I'm doing this job.
I just want to add, all is not lost on every issue at the federal level, because the current administration is actually moving towards allowing states to do importation from Canada. And so if we move towards that legislation next year again, it's likely to be approved, because I've been at AARP 15 years. We've been talking about Canadian importation for about 15 years. And, the case against it always was, well, Washington will never approve it. There's so many hoops you have to go through. So now several states have passed it. They're moving towards it. It's not a solution, because if every state did it, it wouldn't work. But it's meant to be a driver on pharmaceutical manufacturing to bring down costs. So our good representatives, I'm sure, will pursue that again. The likelihood of it being approved in Washington is a lot higher than it's ever been. So, we can chip away at things, as Representative Scanlon said.
I would like to briefly point out that the importation laws, though, do not include biologics, do not include this one.
Yeah. And we've been doing a lot to bring generic biologics on the market, which is another big fight, so you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Sherry Pratt. I'm from Camden. But I get it about the importation, but that's just a Band-Aid.
Sure.
So, I mean, it helps, but anyway, I have an article here. I was just curious where Connecticut stands. Maryland creates a prescription drug affordability board. Are we looking at that?
Yep, so the Maryland piece was a part of a bill that I also worked on this year with the comptroller, to create a drug review board, in which every time that a drug would be either brought to market, or the review board could determine if a drug, anything nefarious was going on there, and then refer the case to the Attorney General, that they could actually prosecute that case. Maryland was our model for that bill. As you can imagine, that bill was heavily lobbied against, and it was not something that we had enough support to bring forward, but it's something that I'm committed to trying to do again next time around. So.
And I just want to tell you my little story really quickly.
Yeah.
My mother was a Bridgeport school teacher, 30 years. She had seizure issues. And the last time she was in the hospital, they gave her a prescription for a medication. And I went to CVS to find out that it was $750. A retired teacher making $30,000. How in the world? I was crying. How did my mother afford a $750 prescription? I asked the pharmacist, is there a cure? Is there anything? Nope. So I mean, you hear my voice.
Yeah.
It's just so upsetting.
I'm just going to try to work around it.
I saw it from 40 years of retail pharmacy, detail men, et cetera, they have the biggest pocketbooks and checkbooks that you could imagine. Personal note, one of these 4.5 prescriptions a day maintenance just received, took it to my pharmacy. Copay, $438. Copay generic, $260. And the tech took one other avenue. Since the doctor was affiliated with Yale in some program, the copay dropped to $17. There's something criminal there. The other thing I would say, I've never been a fan of a certain company, but how could a retail pharmacy overtake an insurance company?
Yeah. Well, I think the answer to that, and William can chime in on this, is that there is a massive consolidation happening right now in healthcare, and it's not going to be in the favor of consumers, right? We now live in a state where it's basically dominated by two health systems, Yale and Harvard. They own most of the hospitals, they're owning by and large a lot of the doctor's practices. At the same time, insurance companies are merging with pharmacies. And worse, insurance companies are now merging with PBMs, which are the people who I told you earlier are the middlemen between drug companies and pharmaceutical companies. Now they're going to own the PBM and the drug and the insurance company and be fighting this with, so there's, in theory, the person that's supposed to mediate the dispute between a drug company and an insurer and the benefit of the people is now going to be gone from this situation. And I think that that's a very concerning thing. And it's something that we, as policymakers, regulators, anybody, citizens, need to really be asking a lot more questions of. Because the consolidation of healthcare that's happening in Connecticut, but also across the entire country, is not going to be going good for us down the road.
Let me just say, these are extraordinarily important issues, right? You talked about it. These are the drugs that we depend on to live, right? And there's a reason why it's not just unconscionable what they're doing, it's that, we need these drugs for life, and it's because of that they can make so much money, right? It's the most basic dependency that you can get from any customer. And let me just say that's why our antitrust activity, not just around generics, but Sprint T-Mobile, hospital consolidations, all of our work on antitrust, not just in Connecticut, but across the country, is so important. And antitrust law and doing that to break up these big companies in the technology space, for example. There's not a day that goes by that we don't have a discussion about whether it's time to break up Facebook, for example. These are really important discussions to have, and when we have them, sometimes we're accused of being anti-business. We're all in favor of job creation, and we're all in favor of people making honest living and good, strong businesses here in Connecticut, but not when they take advantage of all of us and our families. Right? And in this day and age, I will tell you, every day I walk in the office, and I can almost literally see all these powerful forces bearing down on us, right? Our energy companies, our technology companies, pharmaceutical companies, and we have to push back. And some days it's 200 lawyers in the Attorney General's office, a few thousand more in New York and in California, and we're all together linking arms, pushing back. We're in federal court, city court, as a firewall against all these powerful forces that are bearing down on us. That's what we can do. It is.
My name is Doug. I'm an ophthalmologist, MD. I manage diabetic patients, leading cause of blindness in the working age group, and then older patients with age-related macular degeneration, leading cause of blindness in that age group. And to represent Scanlon's point, there is this big consolidation. Why are physicians selling their practices out? And as Ken said, we're not just consumers and providers, we're also business owners. And so the cost of our diagnostics and therapeutic drugs are all going up. Recent studies reported that when we give Avastin for wet macular degeneration, a lower cost drug, it actually costs us money, physicians, to give that drug. And that's leading to a wider study that's going to be done. But that kind of business pressure on a business owner is going to say, I got to sell out. I can't survive as an owner. The diabetic patients, somebody just last week came and said, oh yeah, I don't take my insulin. I don't mind. I can't afford it. I made some phone calls, went from over $700 down to $15 to get the drug. And I go, gotta really check with my sources, I think this is okay. And so as a vitreoretinal surgeon, I'm prescribing the insulin so that he can get his meds that he needs. And I am seeing people come into my office with advanced stages of diabetic retinopathy, delaying their care for their wet AMD, and they're terrible cases. And as a surgeon, I then go take them to the operating room and try to fix it and go, hey, you know, it's going to be okay, I think. But we got to fight for what we can. So every day this is being put out there on the battle lines by us, by the physicians. We feel it as consumers, as Ken said. And the advertising budget, I can't tell you how many times people come and go, hey, what about this new drug? Hey, what about this one? You go, well, that's like really expensive and we don't need it in your case. And so we face these challenges. It takes more time to explain to people why Eylea is not a new drug. But the commercials just came out about it. Right. The other thing that we're seeing is that the insurance companies are now getting into promoting studies, sending letters to my patients saying, hey, we found out that you had this diagnosis because we looked at the code that the doctor used, and you need to talk to them about getting in on a trial. Well, so here's more time. So you're wondering why your doctor doesn't spend time with you? It's because the two people before them, he or she had to talk about studies that they're not eligible for. So there's a lot of manipulation going on out there by the larger manufacturers, whether they're healthcare or insurance or drugs. And I think as consumers, you need to be careful what you do, what you believe, what choices you make as you go out there. But this is a real threat to accessibility and quality of your health care, because we don't all want to be owned by one of the big companies. We would like to be out there caring for our patients as we see fit that we've been trained for. So, I'm curious if you have a comment on the pharma-myelin relationship when you take a drug company and put it together with a generic. And this new paradigm that the drug companies are saying they're creating a new construct for payment. So stem cell therapies, gene modification therapies are new ones that are coming out, and you're like, oh, no, we have a new way to figure out how to charge for it. So the new drug for congenital blindness is $450,000.
It's very concerning. By the way, Myelin would not be Pfizer's only generic subsidiary. They also own Greenstone. And so, you know, the consolidation is not good for consumers. And to have such a huge international conglomerate controlling a generic manufacturer, and I read in the paper that they asked Pfizer, you know, aren't you concerned about Connecticut's lawsuit and the state's lawsuits against generics, including Myelin? There's nothing there. You're kidding. It's because they can, it's not they're too big to fail, it's they're too big to care. They can afford, they will break the law as long as they can afford to do it.
I want to be respectful of the Attorney General's time. I see a couple more hands, so Dr. Wallach.
So, first of all, Sean, as Attorney General Tom mentioned, I also, since you got elected 20 years ago for the first time.
That's long enough.
Going back to the insulin question, insulin over the last 10 years, and you get a sense of this already, it's risen 240%. $600 a month for the cost of insulin. Do the math over the course of the year. It is totally impossible to pay for those kinds of activities and charges. I'm going to make a recommendation for a call for action, and that is that Colorado, just on the insulin, I'm not talking about all the other medications and so forth, which are all very, very important. But on the insulin issue, Colorado, as you probably know, has already passed legislation signed by the governor limiting the cost of the increased cost of insulin. If we haven't referred to that legislation, I recommend that we look into that legislation. It's available. Secondly, I represent the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. We are more than anxious to work with whomever it is that we can work with in order to bring these costs up in a realm that's manageable. Everything is reasonable, but the cost of insulin is totally unreasonable. We're available. I have a packet of information here at the end of the meeting. I'll drop it off to both of you, and hopefully we can go together. forward together.
Thank you. Former Senator Ben Meyer.
So I wanted to ask you about public option, your bill. First, what is the target population that might use the public option? And secondly, as you look at the power of the insurance companies in Connecticut, and we were once the capital insurance companies in Connecticut, how strong is that lobby in terms of preventing the public option? Because I kind of think we heard from you and from the state controller.
Yeah, very strong. You know, I introduced the bill this year, and Christine, when she got into office, worked with me on this bill because she knows this firsthand. Small business owners and individuals are getting crushed by the cost of health insurance in this country and especially in this state. And there is really not much that we can do that's going to happen on the private market unless we disrupt that market, because there's no incentive for an insurance company to offer a cheaper product if their other fellow insurance companies are not doing the same thing. And so what I did this year was to introduce and champion a bill that would create a public option in the state of Connecticut in which small businesses, which are getting hammered by the cost of health care, as Christine talked about, could have bought into the state employee plan to get the same health insurance that Christine and I have at a cost that would be more affordable. They didn't have to do that. If they liked their insurance and they wanted to keep it, they can certainly do that. But this other option, I believe, and many people believe, would have injected a little more competition into the market and helped us bring the cost down. That bill was met with universal and very strong opposition from the insurance industry. They ran ads against me. They tried to, say that I was bringing on, all these terrible things that were going to happen. And all I was saying to them is, I want you to go down to my district on the Guilford Green and walk around to the business owners there and ask them if they would like a cheaper option for healthcare. And I want you to find one of them that says, no, I do not. And then CBIA, which is the main lobbying group of the business in the state of Connecticut, I want you to ask yourself if you really are reflecting the views of your members by opposing a bill that would give them a guaranteed 20% cheaper cost of their insurance than they have in the previous year, because that's what the bill was going to require these insurance companies to do. Any bill that we're talking about here is met with a lot of opposition, but I go back to the bipartisanship here. The prescription drug importation from Canada is supported by everyone from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump, right? The bill that I did in transparency was supported by every single member of the legislature. It takes political courage to stand up to special interests, but if we do it together, it's the good thing that we all of you are looking for us to do in Hartford. You don't want us to be fighting each other. You don't want us to be tweeting each other. You want us to be working together. And if we are working together, it makes taking on these big interests a lot easier. And so you weren't asking this, but I'm going to use this as my pitch to all of you, which is that whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't care. If I'm not your representative, if Christine's not your senator, go and talk to your state legislator and ask them to get involved with us in this fight, because we need more people to stand with AARP and the Alliance of Retired Americans and Kristen's group and stand up to these big people, because frankly they're bullies and they usually get their way. Because, like children, I'm about to have one, and everyone tells me, thank you, when they're acting out, the worst thing you can do is give them attention and make them think that the acting out is okay. And that's what these guys do. And if we're not going to let them do that, if we're all together and united, Democrat, Republican, all of us, I think we can finally win this battle. And the more that we can win this battle, the more that you, as the consumer, win the battle. It's my 2 cents. Dr. Lee.
First, I want to thank you, our elected officials, the Attorney General, Senator, and the representatives for doing all this work. I have 2 questions. One, what is the favorite nation clause mean? From what I hear, that pharmaceutical companies sell drugs to other countries. That's why you drive to Canada for cheaper. Can we implement some of the favorite nation clause in which they have, if they sell it cheaper to Canada, they have to sell it the same price to us? And my second question is, under Medicare, is it still in the law of the nation that Medicare cannot bargain with pharmaceutical companies?
Yes.
It's still there.
Yes.
It has not been taken out.
Yes.
Because that was put in by George Bush
Yep.
the second.
Yeah, so on that front, it's the single biggest thing, in my opinion, that the Congress and the President can do to step up to address this problem is there's a law, 2003 law on Medicare that prohibits Medicare from negotiating directly with drug companies to save Medicare beneficiaries money. It is ridiculous. It is costing seniors a lot of money because of that inability to negotiate. The VA, for example, does negotiate right now with drug companies, and they see cheaper drug prices than Medicare does because of that negotiation. So I really do hope that the President and the Congress do take that on. On the favored nation stuff, it's a complicated issue. The state comptroller, who I work with on a lot of this stuff, he has favored nation status on the state employee drug plan, which is what allows him to save cheaper drug prices for all state employees. But it's not such a thing that's wide across the market, and we'd have to change the law to enable us to have more favored nation status on that.
Thank you.
Other folks before we, yeah?
Hello, I'm Steve Wolfson. I'm a retired physician and a patient, and I have family members who've been ill. In fact, 13 years ago, when my late wife was dying of her cancer, her co-pays were $8,000 a year. So I fully appreciate what the issues are here. Another problem from my standpoint, if I see a patient and I want to prescribe medication for them, I have no way of knowing what it will cost them. And in fact, this has been mentioned, the choices are not priced in a rational fashion. It is not uncommon for the patients to call me back from the pharmacy to tell me that the generic is costing more than the prescription drug. The market needs to be rationalized. Currently, it is not.
This problem is so much bigger in scope than just about prescription pricing. We're, dealing with insurance companies, pharma, physicians, all of these things, patients are coming together to really, tackle the larger issue. I think you had mentioned before about, one drug costing tons of money, not on insurance, and then all of a sudden somehow that same drug gets whittled down. And that, I talked a little bit about my migraine drug. Well, miraculously, my migraine drug is completely covered on state insurance. So we have a huge disparity that we need to deal with. I know, dealing with the importation of drugs from Canada is a Band-Aid, but it's about chipping away at these problems, as John had said as well, and making sure that we're doing little by little all we can to tackle the larger issue that really is a federal issue. I mean, we shouldn't be able to, we can talk a little bit as well about how certain things require a prescription in the United States that don't require a prescription in countries like Canada or Mexico or in the European Union. Why is that the case? And really delving into this problem requires us to chip away at it little by little and perhaps put Band-Aids on it short term to try and save the people of Connecticut all that we can.
I'm Alan Fairbank, a health economist and Guilford resident. And I can tell you from professional experience, looking at 30 years of price gouging and advertising and criminal conspiracy by the drug industry, we all have to get to our legislators and say this must stop. Now, for a personal note, I think I want to make a point on fairness and transparency. Fairness, it's not fair that there would be a group of Connecticut residents that is scared to death of going to the pharmacy because they cannot afford it, and another group of Connecticut residents that is absolutely fearless. And that group would be Connecticut employees and retirees. 22 years ago, when I married into the benefit of a Connecticut state employee, I paid $10 per prescription, no matter what the dose, for brand name drugs, and $5 per prescription for generics. When retirement came, it went down to 6 and 3, and actually lately, I've been having 0 copay. Now mind you, 10-day dose, 90-day dose, same copay. Now this is ridiculous. It's just not fair. Now I realize that retirees have fixed incomes and that, but I can afford to pay more, and many retirees probably can. If at the very least, I would pay into an affordability fund when I get up my prescription, I can't pay more copay. But as far as that goes, doesn't it make retirees overconsume prescription drugs? I mean, make them that cheap. And they don't know what the state is paying. They have no idea. The state may be paying $1,000 for a 90-day prescription. I went to the pharmacy 5 years ago for a drug called Scanlon, 30-day prescription, $455. That's about $15 per pill. And I said, and I realized I know that because it said right on the prescription in 6-point type, total cost, of which I paid 6.
Yeah.
It was a brand name drug. I asked the pharmacist, what is this? Isn't there a generic for this? And she said, well, there is, but it's a different dosage. It's 10 milligrams instead of 6. And so I went back to my doctor and said, will you please give me doxepin for 10 milligrams? And he did, it was $50. Now, you should put a law requiring the total cost to be on the receipt when you get the prescription.
Yeah.
And require the pharmacist to specifically say whether there's a generic available for the drug.
Yeah. So there's a lot there, and I will try to just answer it very quickly because it's a lot of in-the-weed stuff, and you and I have sort of corresponded about this. On the state employee side, yes. These are all collectively bargained things that for years and years meant, depending on when you started working for the state, that you either have no copay, or a little bit of copay, or what. We have taken steps to address that in 2018. We cut the benefits of those state employees by $1 billion. Now all the new ones that we can't renegotiate people that worked in the 70s, but the new guys, they have a different set of contracts that are there. Second, that's exactly why I wanted to open it up to everybody, because I think I'm embarrassed when I go to CVS because I'm standing in line paying $5 for something and the person behind me is paying a lot. I want everyone to have the same benefits that I do, and that's why I sponsored that bill. On the last piece of it, back to PBMs, the state comptroller, I mentioned him a lot, Kevin Lembo, he has a really important job of negotiating, as I just said, directly with these insurance companies and drug companies. And he just renegotiated the state's PBM contract. There's probably 5 people in Connecticut who could actually talk to you about this. It's a very inside the weeds thing. But the most important piece of it is something that I just recently experienced myself, which is that I too take a prescription drug every day for acid reflux. And when one drug was not working, I went to the pharmacy. The doctor simply wanted me to try out a new drug. And I tried to get it, and the pharmacy handed me a humongous pill bottle. And she said, this is a 90-day supply. I said, oh, no, that's nice of you, but I actually only need a little bit. She said, well, your PBM contract requires that no matter what you need the drug, I have to give you a 90-day supply of it. Well, guess who's paying for that, guys? All of us, the taxpayers. Because if we are requiring every state employee to get a 90-day supply of every single drug that they get, even if they don't need it, we are wasting taxpayer dollars. And so thankfully, the new PBM contract that the state comptroller just negotiated no longer has that. But think about all the money that we wasted for years and years and years over this stuff. And so the last point that I make is we have to get much leaner at the state, and the comptroller is doing a better job of that, but we have to find savings where we can, and drug prices for state employees should be no different than drug prices for all of us, and we have to do a better job of that. I know there's maybe one more.
Well, my concern is that the prices shouldn't be so high that they can't be paid for out of whatever the insurance plan is. I'm concerned when I say I have a family member who pays $18,000 a month for cancer drugs. I have someone else it started at 12, I think, and then went up to 18. Somebody else started at $10,000 a month for a different cancer drug, went up to 15 within 2 months a month. Now, a lot of this is covered, but even the amount that's covered, how sustainable is that? And I said, the drug companies are sucking the money out of the insurance pockets that are paying for the drugs. I remember reading an article in the 1980s where Michael Milken, I don't know if you remember the Just Fund guy, all right, he had said our next source of income for corporations and for his type of investment is the pockets of healthcare money and education. Yeah, two things, education and healthcare. So they have focused in, I think, on both of those, and they're really, it's insane, it's illegal, it's immoral. The way they manipulate the cost of drugs to suck the money out of the pockets where it's being used to help people live when they need these drugs. My brother-in-law cut his, unbeknownst to us, started taking his heart medication every other day. Led to a stroke, had 2 miserable years, and then he died. And it was all because that became, once he retired, that became much too expensive for him. So these people, like Milton's of the world, and I think the drug companies, a lot of times, are they concerned with the people they're creating these drugs for? As John pointed out, it's 80% of it does not go for the creation of new drugs or for anything that helps the consumer or the individual. So they're sucking the money out and they're sharing it with the wealthy investment class. And I think something has to be done. And I thank you for trying to do it.
Thank you.
So the message here is it's not just cost, it's lives, right? And that, when we begin to realize that, you get very passionate about it, right? Because this is life that's being covered. I actually am interested in a comment from Attorney General. There's a story about when a drug is about to come off and be able to be made generically, that farmer will call the generic company and say, hey, if you don't make this, I'll pay you X millions of dollars so that you don't make it. More money than you would make if you made it. Will you comment on that?
So we're looking at all of that. We're looking at the phase in which a drug comes off of patent protection. There's an initial phase called the authorized generic. And so that's often made by the same company that made the patented version of the drug. And so the authorized generic will sort of be the lead as it comes into market. And that's the point at which there's a lot of mischief, right? That the authorized generic will then start colluding with the other players that might come into the market. And they'll say, okay, hey guys, we can either kill each other or we can come to an understanding. And more often than not, they come to an understanding.
And I would just say very quickly, that was also in our bill, there was a pay for delay issue where we were going to actually levy a tax on those that did that because they were basically taxing us by conspiring to keep cheaper drugs off the market. I will tell you, the market is sort of correcting itself in that regard. There was about 100 of these 10 years ago. There was only 15 of them last year. 15 is still bad, but it is going in a better direction. But that, again, was part of this massive omnibus bill that we worked on to pass this year and came up a little short. I just want to give our first selectman a chance to chime in before we wrap everything up.
First off, I want to thank the three of you for coming to Guilford and having this forum. It's important for this kind of dialogue. People understand what is being done on their behalf. And I also want to thank you for the work that you are doing, all three of you. I couldn't help but think, while you were talking about the criminal nature of this, some crimes are victimless. You know, there's no blood on the street, there's, $100,000 wasn't taken out of your bank account or whatever it was. But I think everyone is a victim here, regardless of whether you get one prescription a year or you're taking 4 pills a day. We're all paying attention. It doesn't, I'm only on one per year, one 30-day course. I've been robbed too, right? So all of us need to be outraged, in addition to those who are, on some of these more outrageous cases. One personal comment. There was a time when monopolies were regulated. These guys are monopolies.
Yeah.
And they're getting away with doing whatever they want. So thank you for the work you're doing.
I just want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to give a special shout out. I see Terry, Buckley, I know Todd and Rick were here from Park and Rec. They were our hosts today, so please thank them. I just want to thank our guest today, Attorney General William Tong. As he said at the beginning, he's been my friend for a long time, and I really look forward to working with him on this issue for many years to come. But I want to just close by thanking all of you for being here today and ask you and beg you to keep talking to us about this. Keep bringing your ideas to us, keep bringing your comments to us, bringing your questions to us. We use these things in our day-to-day life to sell why we need to do this because we tell your story. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time to be here.